Hey guys! For today's video, I'll be showing you guys my top 5 favorite K-pop albums of 2018. The list will only include the albums you see here, which are the 2018 releases that I bought. If I bought the album, it means I really enjoy it. An album not making my top 5 list takes nothing away from the album. It just means I like my top 5 just a bit more. To start, I want to address that Jonghyun's album was not considered for the list, mostly because it still feels weird to listen to his last work. I'm sure it's an amazing album though, but it just feels weird to add it on a list like this. Second, I would like to address that there will not be multiple entries for the same artist. So for artists like Red Velvet, there will only be one of their albums of their 3 or 4 releases of this year. I put a lot of thought into making this list, so a few of my favorite albums didn't make the cut. But I will show you what albums they are in the honorable mentions right now. It was honestly really hard to pick just 5 albums for this list, because then I had to cut some of my favorites, which unfortunately were these 3. For Taemin's Taemin, the only reason why it didn't make the cut was because this is a Japanese album. If my list had included J-pop, this would have easily been number 2. This album is so good from start to finish, one of my absolute favorite works of his. But to keep this list purely K-pop, this album did not make the list. Secondly, we have EXO CBX's Blooming Days. This album is the definition of underrated. So many great songs on here, great dance, fantastic title track, one of my favorites this year. Because of how underrated this album is, it did hurt me to not add this in my top 5 list. This album is so good. It's just a bummer that I had to cut it off my list during the touch-ups. And lastly, we have Mama Moo's Blues. This album was the last one to be cut off my list. When I first made it, I honestly thought this album would have made it. But a late release warmed itself into my heart, so it made the list instead of this album. Mamamoo came back with 3 albums this year, and they're all amazing. The reason why this album's in my honorable mentions and not Yellow Flower or Red Moon is that I just love the vibe of this entire album. From start to finish, it just puts me in such a soothing mood. This is such a great album. You do not understand how hard it was to not add this on the list. But it takes nothing away from this. It is a great, great album. Give it a listen. Give all of these 3 a listen. They are fantastic albums. And now to start off the list, here we have number 5. And it is Sunmi's Warning. This is so beautiful and fantastic. I love this album so much. It honestly feels like listening to her diary. This album sounds so personal, and because of that, this album is very special to me. From the very first beat of the first song of the album, I was hooked. It is addicting. This album, both musically and visually, is an art piece. It is so, so good and so beautiful. Hence its spot on my number 5. Next, for number 4 on my list, is an album that came as a surprise for me. I didn't think I would enjoy this as much as I did, and it's a late release, so it just squeezed itself into a spot, and it is Key's Face. This is his debut album. Oh my gosh, this album is so damn good. I couldn't believe he actually debuted with a full-length album. I think there's like 12 tracks on here. Every one of them is fantastic. It is a bummer that this album's getting slept on. You see Key in all those memes, but not enough people are actually supporting his albums. They just like laughing at his comical stuff. His music is so good, don't sleep on it. From his 2 title tracks to all his B-sides, everything was done really well. There's so many different genres on here, and he sounds so smooth. If you like rock, there's a rock track. If you like pop, there's a pop track. If you like EDM, he has an EDM track on here. Even though there's a bunch of different genres, everything all fit together because everything has like a very Key vibe. So everything works, even though we shouldn't. And in the number 4 entry was Key's Face. For my number 3 entry, it was the hardest decision I had to make in making this list. Simply because this artist released 3 Korean releases and all of them were great, and it was just hard to pick one. For my number 3 entry, it is Red Velvet. But not all 3 are on this list. I actually only picked 1. It was really hard to do though. For the Perfect Red Velvet, you have an entire album of great songs. Some of my absolute favorite Red Velvet songs are on this album, such as Bad Boy, I Just, Kingdom Come. This album really sounds like a lot of time was put into making it. For Summer Magic, everything on here is great. It is an album I find myself going back to over and over again. And last but not least, for RBB, it is the underdog of the 3. From the title track to the B-sides, I love everything. Of the 3, this is more of an experimental album. They've tried quite a few new things in this, and because of that, not a lot of people enjoyed this album. but I do enjoy this one. But I do have to make a decision of the three. And my number 3 entry belongs to the album The Perfect Red Velvet. You do not understand how hard it was to make this decision. When I first considered Red Velvet on this list, Summer Magic actually won out. But then RBB made a release, and I was like, oh, that sounds good too. But in the end, I went back to The Perfect Red Velvet. Although it has 1 or 2 B-sides like Out of Boy that I don't really enjoy as much as the other tracks, for the most part, this album is beautiful. It is so precise in every move it makes. Every beat, every lyric, every note. Everything sounds like it was put into a lot of consideration before being put onto the final product. If I had to put a Red Velvet album onto this entry, it had to have been the perfect one. For my second favorite album, this list was an easy decision to make. Right when this album came out and I gave it a listen, I already knew I enjoyed it a lot. It was just a matter of how high I should put it on my list. And this album is EXO's Love Shot. I included Love Shot on this list instead of Don't Mess Up My Tempo because I do like the additions of Love Shot and the other B-sides. So that's why I have the repackaged version on here instead of the normal version of the album. Because I'm a relatively new EXO stan, I'm constantly impressed with EXO. Every time they come out with something new, I'm like, wow, this is amazing. I'm just constantly mind blown by what they can do. One of the reasons why this album ranks so high on my list is because of their song tempo. When you have a song that beautiful and that complex on your album, you will rank high on a favorites list. The execution, the vision, everything about it really propels this album as a great album. I feel like for this album, EXO aimed really high and the expectations were even higher. And for some reason, they were still able to meet it all. They did a fantastic job on this album, which is the reason why this made it as number 2 on my list of favorite albums this year. And we're finally at number 1. From the first time I listened to this album since its release, I already knew this was my album of the year. And it is SHINee's Story of Light EP 1, 2, and 3. Together they make up SHINee's Story of Light. Not only is this album beautiful, it is a meaningful album. For me, this album feels like a hug. The execution of how they went about this album was very thought out. Considering this is their first album after what happened, everything had to be done very thoughtfully and carefully. And they did just that. I love the little homages to Jonghyun throughout this promotion. Every song on here is beautiful and heartfelt. Everything about this album just have a little bit of added meaning to it, which makes it rank so high on my list into number 1. You do not understand just how special this album is to me. It helped me cope in a time when I thought about him every single day. And because of that, I am very thankful for this album. Easily album of the year and number 1 in my heart for 2018. And these are my top 5 favorite K-pop albums of 2018. For number 5, we have Sunmi's Warning. Number 4, Key's Face. Number 3, Red Velvet with The Perfect Red Velvet. Number 2, EXO's Love Shot. And number 1, SHINee, The Story of Light. Did any of these entries come as a surprise? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I know this list is SM artist heavy. I am an SM stan and most of the albums I bought were from SM artists, so this list shouldn't be too big of a surprise that it is SM heavy. Although you may disagree with my list, this is still my list. I put a lot of thought into choosing these 5, so I hope you guys respect that. And that was the video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this video was a good way to start 2019 for this channel. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit the like button to let me know. If you enjoy my content, you can hit the subscribe button if you have not already. And in the comments below, write down your top 5 favorite songs or albums for 2018. I'm very curious to know. But aside from that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope the new year is treating you guys well, and I'll see you guys soon. Bye!